What's up, guys? Welcome back to Starting Out Solitary. Drew here, and it is week 207, and we are discussing mental illness and paganism. Now, first thing I want to say is I feel a bit uncomfortable talking about this topic. Not because there's anything wrong with talking about the topic, but I am an outsider on this topic. I have never been diagnosed with any sort of mental illness. Obviously, I am speaking from a position of complete ignorance almost. Having said that, it is the topic, so I will discuss, but please understand that this is coming from someone who is a complete outsider to this topic, and I am trying to do so from the most loving, respectful place possible. So as I say, I myself have never been diagnosed with a mental illness. My mother suffered depression her entire life. She was actually institutionalized for a month or so when I was 6. No, I was 8. I don't remember exactly how long it was, but she was in an institution. She had a breakdown. My mother's mother was diagnosed with manic depression in the 60s, and the things my mother described about that woman's behavior made me very glad I was not raised by her, because she did scary things due to mental illness. My daughter suffers with anxiety and panic attack disorder, and these two disorders cause her to occasionally have depression and need to take medication for depression. She's not on any at the moment because this kind of thing has peaks and valleys, ups and downs. And right now she's in a good place. She's working again, and that helps because panic attack disorders and anxiety can make a person become very isolated because it makes, she has social anxiety for sure, but she can't drive. It wreaks havoc in her life. But through the years of treatment and talking with her and her getting a better sense of herself and her situation, we both have come to the conclusion separately and then talked about it together that her depression, she doesn't have depression. It's just that the anxiety sometimes puts her in a position to become depressed. If she can be out in the world living a normal life as much as possible, she's not depressed. It's when she becomes completely isolated, when she's not working and she doesn't go anywhere or do anything, that she becomes very depressed. So obviously, mental illness is complicated. As I've said, I've not ever been diagnosed, but I have had 3 episodes in my life that I thought, oh, I might need help. Each time that I have dealt with this idea that I might need mental help was due to extreme circumstances. The first time I was 16 and I didn't think I needed help at all, honestly. I didn't understand what was going on. I went through a deep depression for a short time, thankfully. But in my early 20s, I realized, I started analyzing. I'm like, that wasn't right. What was going on there? And analyzing it, and I figured out the underlying root, which were repressed issues and emotions, big trauma from childhood that had not been dealt with, that surfaced and reared its ugly head in the only way it knew how at that time. And through a great deal of introspection and self-analysis and shadow work, which I didn't even know I was doing at the time, I dealt with that, and it has never bothered me since. The second time, I was probably 24, and I was in a situation that was purely mundane. I had a 2-year-old child who was sick a lot. I was the manager of a convenience store, gas station, and I had to be to work every single day at 3 o'clock in the morning. Well, I had to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to be there by 4 in the morning. And I often would work more than 10 hours a day. Saturdays and Sundays, I would work maybe 5 or 6 hours, but the rest of the week, who knows? I was working well over 70 hours a week, going home, passing out, getting up, taking care of a baby who was sick a lot. I remember times sitting in the bathroom crying with him as he cried, trying to keep him from keeping everyone else in the house awake. And being that way till, 1, 2 in the morning, turning around, getting up at 3 and going to work. I was overworked. I was exhausted. This went on for 6 months until I genuinely felt like I was going to need to check myself into an institution, that I was going to have an emotional and mental breakdown. I was just exhausted. I was coming close to the edge. And I quit my job and I was fine. Like, every time I've gone through something, it has been an extreme situation. It's not just something that is within me, I guess. The third time being when I had my initiation, and I didn't think, I thought I was losing my mind. I genuinely thought, and it was just, I was having a lot of very mystical experiences. And once I figured out what was going on, I was fine. Everything was fine. But I started looking into schizophrenia and all kinds of stuff. I didn't know what was happening with me. And the third time was my introduction to my path. Now, before that, I was always what I am. I was always a pagan, and I practiced witchcraft without realizing that I was doing witchcraft. I think people do that every day, all the time anyway. People who just do things, they do spells without knowing they're doing spells. They're practicing magic without knowing it. I did that. I'm sure all of you did as well. But the third one was when I finally was awakened to my path and walked with intention and purpose and consciously walked my path. So I don't really know how I would have handled those situations if I would have handled them differently at all. Being pagan, knowing, actively, consciously being pagan at the time that I went through them. I think that being on any spiritual path could be a double-edged sword. If you are devout, if you are very in tune and highly sensitive and just all in on that path, I think that having mental illness and walking that path could be a double-edged sword. And I'm going to focus on paganism, obviously, because that's what we're talking about. Now, for instance, depression. Let's say someone is diagnosed with a mild depression. Being a pagan is probably of great benefit because pagans are drawn typically to being out in nature, and just being out in nature is good for depression. It alleviates symptoms of depression. So that's wonderful. That would be a great boon. But if your diagnosis was something, if someone were diagnosed with, say, schizophrenia, and they could misinterpret their symptoms as part of their path. They could think that a dark god or goddess was coming to them and guiding them, when actually it's something else. Now, I have been told by mental health professionals that if you hear voices, see things, whatever, as long as there is no negative connotation, it's fine. Interfering with your everyday life and not allowing you to live your everyday life. And they are abusive and they're telling you to do things that are harmful to yourself or others, this kind of thing. So I could see how things that we believe on this, a lot of us believe on this pagan path, could be manipulated by someone with a severe mental illness. They could easily, I think, misinterpret their symptoms as being part of this spiritual path, just being something spiritual rather than a mental illness. And that's a sticky subject anyway, because the things that have happened to me in my life and on my path, the things I've seen and experienced before and after becoming consciously aware of my path, if I found out that they were hallucinations, that it wasn't real, that it was some form of mental illness, I might not be that surprised, because they are extraordinary things. I think the topic is, for me, it's a sticky one. There are certainly things that have happened to me that I ascribe to a spiritual, mystical experience that I concede could also fall into a mental illness, hallucination, auditory and visual hallucinations could fall into that category as well, if I were ever diagnosed with a mental illness of that sort. There are many pagans with mental illness, but that is because there are many, many people afflicted with mental illness in this world. I also have wondered, in thinking about this topic, I wondered if people with OCD wouldn't find magic and ritual helpful in a way. Again, I do not know anyone who has been diagnosed with OCD. I have watched some shows about it. Of course, that does not make me any kind of authority on the topic, but I have seen that many people, there's all forms and degrees of OCD, but there are people who become very ritualistic as a result of their OCD. They have to vacuum once a day and the lines have to go a certain way. They have to touch the knob 3 times before they go in and out the door. They're very sort of ritualistic. And some people, it gets so far out of control, it's like it runs their whole life. But I wonder if channeling that sort of energy, that sort of need into magic and ritual work, which is already ritualistic, wouldn't be a benefit, wouldn't be something that's fulfilling to them, because if it were something that they felt connection to, it would also be fulfilling to them, maybe on a spiritual or some sort of deeper level, as well as just fulfilling the need to do something repetitively, ritualistically. I don't know. I think this is a really complicated topic. Like I said, I am really inept. Some mental illness, of course, has to do with our psychology. And I think that the pagan path is it's a beautiful path with regards to dealing with psychological issues. All the things we're encouraged to do, work with tarot. To me, the tarot is very psychological. It is a psychological tool. Shadow work. Shadow work is immensely helpful for dealing with past traumas and things that will no doubt have an effect on someone's mental health. So I think that there are many aspects of the pagan path that are bound to be beneficial for people suffering with different forms of mental illness. But I just think it's going to depend on the type of mental illness and the degree to which they suffer from that mental illness, whether or not they can be helped purely through paganism, and more importantly, what effect paganism might have on their mental health. Because again, depending on what that mental health issue is, I can see aspects of any spiritual path, but we're talking about paganism, having a negative effect, hindering and adding to delusion and things of that nature. So I don't know. I am the most uncomfortable that I have been making a video for starting out solitary thus far. And I'm okay with that. But I genuinely hope that my thoughts were not insensitive or didn't come off judgmental. As I said, I've had many loved ones who have suffered with mental illness, and I have nothing but love and respect for people who suffer from mental illness, particularly the really things like schizophrenia. Like, it's heartbreaking. And I apologize if I did not do the topic justice. I did the best I could. I guess my synopsis is that I feel that any spiritual path, and since I am a pagan and I love the pagan path so fully, of course, that's right at the top of the list. But I'm sure any of them that I have looked at to any degree, they all have beauty and truth within, and I'm sure it could be nothing but beneficial for people who suffer from mental illness to have that in their lives. So I don't know if that's the direction this topic was meant to go in or what, but that's where I went. So thanks for hanging out, guys, and until next time, much love and gratitude.